Hey, please watch this short video and you will get the answers you are seeking.
Welcome. Hi all, I am Arun Matad, this side. Today we're going to be going over the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And this book is really a staple in the personal development niche. I would say it's a book that almost everyone that is interpersonal development, or into entrepreneurship, or into business whatsoever has probably read, or at least heard about in the past. And for me, it was one of the books that was really a cornerstone when I was going out on my personal development and entrepreneurship journey that started about 10 years ago. So first off, we go into the overview of the book. And in the overview of the book, really what I've done is just kind of break down some of the key tenets that are taught in the book that don't fit necessarily super neatly into one of these other categories that are the 7 habits. So in the overview, we're first going to go over the personality ethic versus the character ethic. And this really speaks to two different types of personal development and self-help, knowledge and information. So personality ethic is where most new school personal development books are focusing on it, and they focus on things like increasing your public image, how you dress, how you perform, and the social interactions, positive mental attitude skills, techniques, to get people to behave in a certain way. So a lot of this stuff in the personality ethic kind of side of personal development is really shortcuts for getting people to act the way that you want them to act. And shortcuts for, getting ahead in the business or really getting ahead in any endeavor that you're trying to get ahead in. And they can work for a short amount of time, but they often lead to people feeling meaningless, right? So you're coming from, I'm going to change my personality in order to fit in order to get ahead, in order to achieve what I, for whatever reason, feel like I want to achieve. And that's where the personality ethic is coming into play. And again, this is what a lot of the new school personal development books are being written about. And honestly, it's probably because the character ethic has kind of really fallen out of favor ever since. I think World War I is what Stephen Covey says in the book. And that's interesting just to see how society has kind of shifted since the World War I, and how society kind of changes based on what's going out at the time. So as you can see, the character ethic is what's going to be focused on the most in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it's most of the classic personal development books focus on this as well. So this is, things like your How to Win Friends and Influence People. You're probably thinking Grow Rich and other books similar to that are going to be focusing most on your character rather than maybe your tips and tricks of how to get people to like you. So things like integrity, humility, simplicity, fairness, modesty, love, courage, justice, and the golden rule. So those are all things that the character ethic will focus on. And that's what we're to be focusing on in this book, this type of ethic. And if you circle yourself and hone yourself in on this character type of ethic, is going to give you a deep meaning, and it gives you a moral compass that's going to guide your decisions more so than giving you actions to take in order to get towards whatever goal you might be aiming for. So the next thing that we're going to get into is that perception is not reality. And this one can be a little slippery if you've never heard about it before. But basically what we're going to do is look over how we see things in a different way. And we never really questioned if they're true or not, right? So the way that you perceive the world is the way that you perceive the world. And you never really questioned if it's true or not. In the way that Stephen brings this into fruition or shows this is that, in a normal class or in one of his coaching classes, he'll show this image. And now to some of you, this image is going to look like an old lady. And to some of you, this image is going to look like a young lady. So one old lady that has a really big nose, and I can see it right now. She has a giant nose and she's kind of wearing a shawl over her head right there. And this is kind of her hair. And this is the nose. And then this is the mouth, obviously. And so now you guys can probably see that old lady. But some of you are probably not seeing the young lady, which this is the hair. This is kind of a feather that is going, on the top of her head. This is actually her nose, is her eyelid. This is an ear. This is kind of the cheekbone and going down. This is the necklace. So you can see that you are seeing either one of those two things, and to you your perception was your reality. Either this photo was a photo of an old lady or it was a photo of a young lady. But now you can see that because you've gotten past thinking that your perception is the reality and you've dug a little deeper. You can see that either perception was not really reality, and that's a big core tenet of this book. You need to be looking past what your perception of reality is in order to be able to find out what reality really is. So inside this photo right here, there's actually 3 different photos. There's one of the old lady, and then there's one of the young lady, and then there's the true photo that contains all of them. Once you've seen both of them, you probably can't see it. So the next part we're going to talk about in our overview is paradigms. So paradigms are how we see the world to work. And that goes back into the perception of reality, right? Your paradigms are influencing what your perception of reality is on an everyday basis. But you're not necessarily noticing your paradigms because that's how you are living your life. And that's how you've always lived your life. And your reality is just within the paradigm that you are continually living out. A paradigm shift is when how you see the world changes and therefore the world around you changes as well. Very similar to this. This is just on a much smaller scale. Once you see the other side of the photo, your reality completely changes. Your other way that you live your life could completely change just because you shifted your paradigm. You shifted the way that you see the world to work, and everything is completely different after that, and I'm hoping to create some of those paradigm shifts for you guys today. The next kind of thing that we're going to talk about are dependence versus independence versus interdependence. So dependence is basically when you are dependent on someone else. You are either blaming certain people for things that are going wrong in your life, or maybe you are saying, I need to wait until my boss gives me this in order to be able to achieve this thing that I want. So you're waiting both for bad things to happen because of other people and also for good things to happen because of other people. Now, independence is kind of the exact opposite of dependence, and independence is you are in control of your own destiny. You are the one that is going to control whether you get that promotion or whether the bad things are happening in your life, and that would be independence, and that is a complete mindset shift. I would say, and I think Stephen says in the book, that the majority of people are probably in the dependence mindset, and moving towards that independence mindset is very healthy for people because it gives you a sense of purpose in your life. But the next part that we're going to talk about is actually interdependence, and interdependence is kind of a meshing of those two things. Again, is this paradigm shift in perception is not reality. Most people would think independence is the highest level of living, but really interdependence is maybe what we want to move towards if we want to get to our highest level. Interdependence is you take responsibility for everything that's going on in your life, but you also realize that working together with other people is very, very important for you to succeed in whatever endeavor you are looking to achieve, and that's really where we want to move towards, is that interdependence. The next part is the emotional bank account, or the concept of the emotional bank account. And this is kind of playing off interdependence. Once we've moved out of the state of dependence into the state of independence, and that even past that into our state of interdependence, we now need to know how to better interact with these people that are in our life that we're going to be interdependent with. So emotional bank account is basically the same way that a bank account works. People that you interact with on a day-to-day basis also have an emotional bank account, and what you need to do is make more deposits in that emotional bank account. Then you make withdrawals. So withdrawals would be asking for a favor or getting them to do something for you. Or even if it's not even one of those things, it's just getting them to talk to you and getting them to share things with you. It really is important that you make deposits before you ask for those things, or else you'll run into debt, and then those people won't value the relationship that you have with them. So the way that you make emotional bank account deposits would be by understanding other people. So really taking the time to listen to someone and understand where they're coming from by keeping promises, by being clear and upfront. This is one that I really miss, with a lot of people in my day-to-day interactions, is it's very easy to not be clear and upfront with what your motives are, especially let's say in business. If you're looking to create some sort of relationship with someone, you may as well be clear and upfront, because then they're going to trust you way more in the long run. The next one is being loyal, sincerely apologizing. So if you do something wrong, don't be afraid to sincerely apologize, because it's going to fill your emotional bank account with that person anyways, and then forgiving if they end up doing something wrong to you. The last part that we're going to talk about is habits, and it's fairly fitting because every other green bubble that I have here is actually a habit of the 7 habits. So we'll talk a little bit about habits here before we get into those. So habits are things that we do without thinking because we've conditioned them, right? So this is maybe you're getting up at a certain time, you're brushing your teeth at the same time every single day. You're setting up those habits. You have the habit of maybe exercising, you have the habit of reading, you have the habit of meditating, or you potentially have habits that don't serve you. So a lot of those habits would have been good habits that you would say are serving you. And then you also have habits that aren't serving you, right? The habits of watching TV when you come home, maybe eating too much junk food. Maybe you have the habit of not doing one of these emotional bank account things with some of the important people in your life. So you can see how habits are really pervasive and are all the way through our entire lives, and a lot of them are just kind of running unconsciously. And once you build a habit, it can be really difficult to break. Anyone who has tried to break one of these habits that aren't serving them can attest to how difficult it really is to break a habit. Now this is difficult. It's not difficult, impossible. So you have to keep that in mind as well. If it's worth it to change a habit from habit that doesn't serve you into a habit that does serve you, you will be able to do it. It's just going to take some more So the best way to break a bad habit is to change your paradigm. And this is something that is going all the way through in the coaching model that I use with coaching clients and even with myself as well. When I do self-coaching, very, very important to think, how is my paradigm or how is my vision of reality affecting the habits that I'm currently having? And if I change my paradigm and if I change my vision of reality, will it make it easier for me to break a difficult habit or to break a habit that isn't serving me, that is difficult to break? So, something very interesting to think about. How can I change from the inside out rather than the outside in? Which is something that we'll talk about a little bit later. So here we're going to get right into habit number 1. So habit number 1 is to be proactive. And I probably should state that the first 3 habits that we have here are really internal habits. And then the second 3 habits that we have here are really external habits. So these are going to be things that you are doing with your mindset and doing for yourself. And then these are going to be when you're working with other people. And that again is kind of embodying that inside out that I was talking about there just a couple of seconds ago. We're going to start working from the inside out rather than trying to change our habits in external actions. We're going to change our habits that are internal actions. So we're going to jump right into being proactive as the first thing. And I just want to say here that being proactive is much more commonly said now than it was when Stephen Covey maybe wrote this book. And what I want to say is that being proactive, a lot of people think of it as I'm going to go out and do things that need to be done before they need to be done. Or they do it in a work sense where they say, hey, I'm going to think 7 steps ahead and I'm going to get all of those steps done and really, push to get those things done. And I don't think that's necessarily the way that Stephen is kind of putting it into play. I would say that the things that we're going to go through here will give you a much better view of what being proactive really meant to him. So I just want to say, if you already have a perception of what you feel being proactive is, don't skip this part because I think it might be a little different than the way that we're using it today. So first of all, Stephen wants to talk about the concept of the social mirror, and this is basically viewing yourself based on the opinions, perceptions, and paradigms of other people. So this is when you maybe are doing something that isn't necessarily for yourself, it's for someone else. So maybe if you're, I know this as my time as a personal trainer, people a lot of the times end up working out and eating healthy, not for themselves, but because of the way that other people are viewing them. And they don't want other people to view them in a bad way. So they are exercising or eating healthy for other people, and they're really not going to be the most successful, is a nice way to put it. Not only are they not going to be the most successful, but they also are going to feel that working out for them is meaningless. They're not going to find joy in actually getting better and better because they're not really doing it for themselves. And the weird thing about the social mirror is that even if people are putting those negative perceptions on whatever it is for you, whether, like I said, with exercise, it's your weight or how healthy you are, and etc., they're really more projections than reflections. People are showing you what they think of themselves when they tell you what they think of you. So that's something that you really have to think about. How are you living your life based on the perceptions of other people, and then how are other people putting their perceptions on you based on what they think of themselves? And then one more level deeper potentially, how are you putting your perceptions and projections and paradigms on other people based on what you feel about yourself? So that's the way that the social mirror works. Now, self-awareness is human. Self-awareness is your ability to project yourself outside of a situation. The very fact that we can even see the social mirror is something that is only available to humans. So we can project ourselves outside of the situation. We can say, why am I doing this specific habit? Why am I thinking this specific way? Why am I feeling this specific thing? And it's something that is not available to anyone other than humans. So you can notice how you're feeling. You are not your feelings, moods, or thoughts. Right? We all have that experience of our emotions getting the best of us every once in a while and then thinking afterwards, that's not how I would normally act. That feeling wasn't me. Now, if you only had the wherewithal in the moment to be able to develop that self-awareness to see that that emotion was going to come and go because that wasn't really truly you, then maybe you wouldn't have acted that way. Next part, we're going to talk about 3 social maps. So this is basically, again, just kind of showing you a little bit about how the social mirror self-awareness is human. And it's just kind of one level deeper, just to really hammer home the idea of self-awareness here in the proactive chapter. So first one is called genetic determinism. Basically, that's saying that your grandparents did it to you or you did it because of your DNA. And the next one is psychic determinism, which is basically your parents did it to you, which is kind of saying, the way that you were raised. It's kind of nature versus nurture in these 2 first ones. And then the next one is environmental determinism. So someone or something that it's you, whether it's your boss or your environment, that's saying someone or something did it to you. And that obviously would all fall right inside this dependence category. So you can see that the people that are believing this, the people that believe that this is how humans work, are really living in a dependence mindset. And that's not where we want to be. We want to move into interdependence. So as you can see, all of these paradigms only really work for animals and humans who believe them because humans have self-awareness and to have the ability to choose. And in the book, Stephen talks about Viktor Frankl, where we've talked about his book Man's Search for Meaning a few times on the channel, and Audible link for it down below. But basically what Viktor figured out in his time in the concentration camps was that there's stimulus, which is what's happening maybe on one of these levels. And then there's the response, which is what you think is caused by the stimulus. But really in between the stimulus and the response are your ability to choose. And that's innately human. And that's one of the main tenets that Viktor talks about in his book. So we want to remember that no matter what our circumstances, no matter what our heritage, no matter how we were raised or anything that's going on inside of us, we really are the ones that have control over ourselves. So we're going to talk a little bit about proactivity defined in this next bubble here. Human beings are responsible for their own lives, which is exactly what we were talking about before. And he states this in the book. He says, responsibility. And it's really his two words. And we put it together as one, and we think of adopting responsibility as taking on something outside of ourselves. But really responsibility is our ability to respond to a certain stimulus or to something that's going on outside of ourselves. So taking initiative means recognizing our responsibility to make things happen. So it's our responsibility to make things happen when it comes to productivity. And the next thing we talk about is the circles of concerns and influence. So this is really interesting. You don't want to necessarily just be proactive all the time about everything, because if you have something going on, you have an emotion, thought, you have something that you want to accomplish. You don't want to necessarily be proactive on that all the time, because the concern is a thing that you have no control over, but is within your awareness. Really interesting. We've developed that awareness like we talked about up here of something that we don't like. Let's say it's some sort of emotion, let's say it's some sort of an external circumstance that's going on. We don't always have control over that external circumstance, but what we can have control over is our response to that circumstance. And then the next part is the influences. That things that you have control over are in with or within your influence. And this is things that, okay, it's a situation that we don't like, or a situation that we want to be better, or a situation that we want to accomplish something, and it is within our control. Well, we don't want to just control our response to that. If it's within our influence, we want to rectify that, and by taking action because within our influence. But what ends up happening is most of the time people are now spending, even if they're aware, they're spending most of their time in their circle of concern, which is the things that they are worried about but can't actually take action on or can't actually change, when really 100% of your time should really be focused on your circle of influence, things that you would like to change and you can have control over. So again, focus on one thing that you can focus on, the things that you can influence in order to be proactive. Don't focus on being proactive on the things or thinking on the things that you could never potentially change. So our second habit after being proactive is going to begin with the end in mind. This is one that are really interesting, and he doesn't talk about this necessarily in the book, but I think that this is a good exercise that I've read up on before, and it's the Stoic meditation on death. And it's what you would do is you would imagine yourself at your funeral, and what do you want people to be saying about you? What do you want the feeling to be like in the room? Really think your way all the way through your funeral. And it sounds a little morbid, and it sounds like, hey, I don't want to think about that sort of thing. But really what you want to do is think about that, because that is the ultimate manifestation of your life. It really is. Your life culminated all at the very end. How did it play out? What are people saying about you, and what kind of effect did you have on the world? And because of that, you have this ultimate manifestation of beginning with the end in mind. And what it really means is that you should think about the end before you begin. Allow your imagination of the future to guide your actions in the present. So everything that's going on at your funeral, if you had a funeral today, let's say, and people are saying things that you wouldn't want them to be saying at the end of your life, those are the things that you should change. And allowing your imagination to wander all the way till the very end is going to allow you to see what kind of actions you should take in the here and now in order to rectify that, or in order to live more congruent with how you see yourself. And why would you want to do that after you've decided how to guide yourself and not let the social mirror guide you, which is again what we talked about before. You can't let the social mirror guide you. You will need some sort of guidance. So it is very important. This is almost a spiritual journey here, and this begin with the end in mind. A not necessarily religious journey, but something spiritual that's going to be something inside you guiding you, going to be kind of your guiding lights. And this again is talked about a lot in Man's Search for Meaning. It also is talked about a lot in Ikigai, which is another video that I will leave down in the description for you guys below. Those two have quite a lot of overlap, which you're going to just need to spend some time meditating on what you want to do rather than what the social mirror wants to guide you to do. And I would recommend diving into those videos to get a little bit more information on that. So it allows you to decide what's truly important on a daily, weekly, or long-term basis. So after you've decided your meaning, let's say in Viktor Frankl Man's Search for Meaning, or you've decided your ikigai, it allows you to kind of meditate on how you are currently going to be perceived at your funeral versus how you would want to be perceived at your funeral. And then once you take both of those, you can see what actions you would need to take in order to live out that iki or that meaning in your life. So it takes out the emotions of the day-to-day and allows you to be more analytical. I think we've all felt this before, where we might feel like we have a lot of things that we need to do in the day-to-day basis, but we don't necessarily connect those to our meaning or to our ikigai. And it's very easy to get caught up in the monotony of the day-to-day, feeling like we have to do a lot of little things, but not actually leading us towards our guy or our, what we would like our life to be really interesting. That's going to lead us right to put first things first. And the two questions that he asked at the beginning of the chapter are: what one thing could you do that if you did it on a regular basis would make a tremendous difference in your personal life? And then the same thing happens for business. What one thing in your business or professional life would bring you similar results? And when you really meditate on those things, if you started with the end in mind, if you've already meditated on what you want as the end results, and I should say that the Stoic meditation on death is not the only way you could go about it. You could meditate on a certain business project. You can meditate on a certain thing going on in your personal life and watch how it would play out over a certain period of time. The Stoic meditation on death is maybe just the complete culmination of that all, and really would take a long time of meditating, is probably constantly changing as you are constantly changing, with, every day that you are growing and learning. So you would ask yourself those two questions, and then you accept personal responsibility for actions towards those things. So these two things that you think would be able to move you more towards your end, let's say, then you would accept personal responsibility for your actions. That's another huge thing. It's going back to our independence and interdependence, independence model. You want to be responsible for your own actions. You don't want to be stuck in that model of always waiting for someone else to do something for you. If you always wait for someone else to do something for you, quite often you're not going to be able to build up people's emotional bank accounts enough to guide you all the way through your life. So we're going to talk a little bit about time management and in the next part, but it's not necessarily time management. It's more in line with this quote that he has here. It's time cannot be managed. We can only manage ourselves, and I'm sure a lot of you have probably heard different iterations of that quote. I know I've heard it quite a lot, but this is how we're going to get it to really sink in. Stephen talks about the 4 different quadrants, and if you're watching the video, I have 4 different quadrants here on the screen. We have quadrant number 1, which is something that you should manage. This is a crisis. It's important and urgent. It's something that you need to do immediately. And then we go into number 2. This is one that you should focus on. This is important and not urgent. So really interesting. These first 2 are boots important. And then number 3 are things that you should absolutely avoid if you can. It's urgent and not important. So this is all the urgent things. This is maybe answering email. This is a ton of stuff. This is the majority of your time today, unless you've actively worked on this, is definitely spent in quadrant number 3. And then not important and not urgent are just completely escapes. Wastes of time. Watching a YouTube video that doesn't necessarily help you. Or maybe this one would be probably in quadrant number 2 because it's important for you to learn these things in order to move forward in your life. But basically, again, time management, not super important. Scheduling and all that sort of thing I think is great if you can handle it. If you're more like me and you're more free-flowing, you want to just focus on what quadrant am I spending the majority of my working time in, and you want to be spending most of that time is important and not urgent. The tasks that are important to your end but aren't urgent, and you don't need to get them done right away, and this is where you would focus on things that are going to be doing deep work. You're creating value in the world and you're working deeply on a certain project that's going to create a lot of value for people. And it's not something that you need to get done right away. Because if you're rushing your deep work, you're never going to get into the flow because you're constantly looking for a way for yourself to get finished rather than for a way for yourself to accomplish the most. So the next thing we're going to talk about is thinking win-win. And I just want to come back again and say this: for these first 3 habits are all interdependent habits. These are all things that are within yourself. So there are things that you can do for you. And then the next ones are more about relationships in the external world. So thinking win-win. This specifically comes in when we're talking about the 6 paradigms of human interaction. We have win-win relationships. So this is all about relationships, deals, business interactions, any of those things. So win-win, win, lose, lose, win, lose, lose, Win and win, win or no deal. So I'll go through all these really quickly. So win-win is basically both parties are winning in whatever interaction you're doing. Let's say you are a contractor and you're trying to be some sort of a value to another business. You're going to charge what you need for it to be valuable for your time, and they're going to pay what's going to be valuable. Oh, and whatever you give them is going to be valuable to them basically. And no one's going to feel like they lose. The next one is maybe like a slimy salesman. They just want to win and they don't care if other people have to lose. They're going to get the maximum value for whatever they feel like they can get into the company, and the other company is not going to get the maximum value out of them. The next one is maybe you're the contractor and the company is going to end up winning because they're a big steamrolling company and you don't yet value yourself enough to be able to price yourself what you're worth. So you're going to end up lowering your prices. You're going to lose. You're going to give them a huge amount of value and you're not going to get that much in return. The next one is a lose-lose scenario. This is just where both people are not a good fit for the deal that you guys are necessarily doing and you just don't want to be in any of these kinds of deals. The next one is when, again, this is kind of when at all costs, you don't necessarily want the other person to lose, but you don't necessarily care if they win either. And that's definitely not the way that you want to live. It's not going to be able to create long-lasting relationships where you and the last one are win-win or no deal. So this is really interesting. What's the difference between win-win and win-win or no deal? So the top one, the win-win, is basically you're looking for win-win relationships, but if when doesn't happen, you're going to have to resort to one of these things, or you are willing to resort to one of these things if win-win doesn't happen. Or would you rather say, you know what, it's going to be either a win-win relationship or no deal. That's where you want to be because that's going to be where you don't ever burn anyone. You're always living from your sense of purpose and you're always giving as much value as you're receiving. And in turn you're going to be able to build your business much quicker. That way you're always looking for those win-win relationships. And if not, you would rather maybe give them to someone else, or you would rather find a better fit for them elsewhere. So the key idea is when you're thinking win-win are that there is abundance. So even if you have to say no to one of these 4 deals in the middle here, you have to realize that there's going to be another customer. There's going to be another deal out there for you eventually. So you have to be willing to let go of this one that you think that you found. If you can't find a way to make it a win-win. So there's abundance in all things. That's the first key idea, and you're going to have to think about that while you're looking for these win-win interactions. The next one is that you don't want to compare yourself to others. Compare yourself to yourself. So if you are constantly comparing yourself to others, you're going to be willing to make sales that aren't valuable for the other party. You're going to be willing to lower your prices so that you can get more clients or anything like that. There's just a ton of things that are going to go on that get you away from focusing only on win-win or no deal. If you're comparing yourself to other people, so you don't quit until the win-win or no deal. Again, you don't quit and say, you know what, here's the deal that's going to make you win and I lose. That's fine. I'm okay. I just want to get the relationship, etc., etc. You got to make sure it's going to be a win-win relationship. And again, the same thing. We talked about it before. If you're putting money into people's emotional bank accounts, you want to make sure that you are being upfront, you're being clear and upfront when you're making a deal. So that's where this kind of comes in here. And then you want to build up the emotional bank accounts before doing the deal. And if I would have read ahead, I would have saw that that's what was coming next. So we wrapped that up nicely. The next one is to seek first to be understood, that there's to understand and then to be understood. A very interesting concept here. We're going to talk about the seek first to understand. And where we're going to start is that most people are listening autobiographically. They listen to other people and they relate it back to their own experiences. So this is when you hear people saying, and the way that you can see how people are listening to you is and how you're listening even is to listen to the language that you're speaking when you're in a conversation with people. So if someone is saying something like, oh yeah, I know exactly how you feel. That same thing happened to me. It's even rosary if you say, oh yeah, I know exactly how you feel. That thing happened to me. But it was worse because of this. So you got to be careful that you're not listening. In order to relate to your own experiences, you really want to get to the point of where other people are coming from and really understand where they're coming from before you even get into the understood part whatsoever. So a lot of people only listen with the intent of responding with their paradigm, right? So you're not even open to potentially having people break your paradigm or giving you a new paradigm. You're listening from your paradigm. You have a way that the world works and you're going to listen from your paradigm and not try and see, hey, how is that other person viewing the world, right? It would be the equivalent of taking that photo and saying, I only see the old lady. I have no idea how you see the young lady. And I'm not even willing to look at it. I'm just going to keep saying, I know I see the old lady. I only see the old lady. So what you want to do is listen emphatically and really make sure you're understanding to the other person and really understand the other person before you respond. That's really important. You can leave a 5-second count after they stop talking. And a lot of times people will start saying all sorts of things that they never would have said if you leave that little bit of silence, because that little bit of silence is uncomfortable for them. You can totally get them to open up just by being quiet and listening and making sure that you're listening emphatically, understanding where they're coming from, trying to see the world from their paradigm. And once you do that, then you can really understand where they're coming from. So once you've taken the time to listen, you want to make sure that the other person knows you've been listening. And that's how you build their emotional bank account. So you can say something like, "Oh, so what you're saying is X, Y, and Z," and then if they say yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. You understand what I'm saying, then that's kind of your key. Okay, I understand, now it's my point. Now it's my turn to be understood. Really great way to kind of let into, okay, I understand you, now it's my turn to talk. Very, very good way. It's also going to set you up to be understood as well, if that makes sense. So it's going to set the other person up to know, hey, we're both listening to each other. We're not having an argument. We're having a civil conversation. If you just say that a simple thing like, "Hey, I think you were saying this, is that true, yes or no?" And if they say yes, then you understand them, and it's much, much easier to have a conversation with someone. So the next thing we'll do is we'll go into then to be understood. So once you truly understand where someone is coming from, only then can you be truly understood. Exactly like I just said with that transition, you want to make sure that you are making sure that they know that you understand them. Because if they don't know that you understand them, then they're not going to feel like they want to understand what you're saying or want to feel like they want to see where you're coming from. So again, you can think of that old lady and young lady picture until we both know what the other one is looking at. We can't find that. There's actually a third picture, like I talked about with that third picture before. Communication is the most important skill in life, and it involves speaking, writing, reading, and listening. So we've all been trained with our speaking, we've all been trained to talk in front of the class when we were in school, loved and taught to write, and we've all been taught to read. But what we haven't really been taught to do is listen. We've been taught potentially to hear information, write it down, but we haven't been taught really to listen and try and understand what the other person's perspective. So those are our 3 habits that are dealing with you outside world. And really, I wanted to go back into this a little bit. I realized while we were going over everything that really, these are less habits for me. There are less habits in there, more principles. There's potentially a bunch of little habits all within inside this, of thinking when always having that thought of, hey, what can I do next, rather than actually just having a specific habit of one of these things. It's really important to think of them as principles, and you're going to have to build your own habits around these principles. And so habit number 6, what they say in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is, so what is synergy is the highest activity in all of life. The true test and manifestation of all the other habits put together, and the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So the relationship that the parts have together is in and of itself a part. So again, let's dive a little bit. Let's dive a little bit into that. So each one of these, let's call them principles, is very, very, very important. You have to start with those before you can even get to synergy. But the way that all of these work together and the way that you develop yourself in each one of these areas is equally as important. And then also it's equally important when you have other people on your side. Right, we're moving from the independence into the interdependence. Once you can get other people to be proactive with you to begin with, the end in mind, to put things first, to think when to seek first to be to understand, and then to be understood. You can synergize with those people. So when they all have the same paradigm, the values and beliefs and their behaviors, they can all accomplish more together than they can apart. Or even if they were to work as hard individually, the act of working together is going to be the one that actually makes everything to synergize and really come together. So when people don't have the same paradigm, values and beliefs, behaviors, they can't end up accomplishing very much. So the next part we're going to talk about is how to create synergy. So consider how the differences between you and another person might reveal a third picture. So again, if you've been through this, seek to understand and then to be understood. How can you listen to another person and see where is the third picture? Here I have my paradigm. They have their paradigm. How can we both get to that third picture and work together in a win-win relationship? By thinking about the end that we're going to put together here, the goal that we want to accomplish, how can we adopt the paradigm where we're going to work together within synergy? So you want to attempt to understand how conflict in life is coming from a lack of synergy. Really interesting. How is your paradigm and someone else's paradigm being different causing you guys to take actions where, Hey, even if you want to have a win-win relationship, even if you want to put first things first, if you guys have everything the exact same as far as the 7 habits go, you're both proactive and etc., but your paradigm is different and you guys don't come from the same place of self-awareness and understanding of what you really want. You haven't thought necessarily all the way out until the end and explained it to each other and understood each other. That's where the lack of synergy is going to cause a conflict, and then you guys are going to both potentially be trying to work together, but that person is doing something that you don't think is within you, maybe your core competencies or even within things that you can really influence. Maybe they're spending a ton of time on something that you don't think is worth influencing. That's how you're going to create conflict instead of synergy. Okay, so the next is when there's a situation that requires synergy with someone else to get something done, but you can't find a third picture. Evaluate how important it really is. So if you want to accomplish something, let's say it's important to you, and do you want to work together with someone else? And we're going back into our interdependence here a little bit. If there's no way for you guys both to get on the same page, think about how important it really is. If in 10 years, 15 years at your funeral, this is not going to be very important and you have the potential to not have this impact your daily life, you can, for whatever reason, you're in business or it's a relationship that you are doing outside of maybe a boss or a manager type relationship. Can you just let it go? Is it worth it? Did you just let it go? Because if you can't create that synergy, you're never going to be able to accomplish your highest and best use, and it might not be worth it for you to spend your time if you can't find a synergy with those people. So the 7th and final habit is to sharpen the saw. And I just wanted to say that this is exactly what you guys are doing right now. If you're on this video, if you're listening to some of my other videos, if you're trying to actually improve, you are sharpening the saw. And the 7th habit is something that you are already doing very well, probably ahead of the majority of the other people today. And surfing the saw, a core concept in that is continuous improvement. It's focusing on getting better forever. And if you're a weightlifter, you know the idea of progressive overloading, right? So today I'm going to do a bench press of 225, I'm going to do it 10 times, and then next week I'm going to do 225 and I'm going to do it 11 times. And then the week after that I'm going to do 230, I'm going to do it 10 times or 9 times or whatever it is. It's consistently putting more and more weight on the bar, putting more and more work in your hands, putting more and more awareness into your paradigm and continually trying to get better. Most people neglect this because it's not part of the urgent paradigm, right? It's not a party. It's not part of our important and urgent, or our urgent and not important, which is where most people are spending a lot of their time. It's actually within focus. So what you guys are doing right now is actually in paradigm or in quadrant number 2. So very, very important to think about continuous improvement. You guys already have this down if you're on this, and I want you guys to keep it up as much as you can. Now, when you're sharpening the saw, it's important to think of yourself in 4 different planes. You've got 4 different needs. You have your physical need, you have your mental need, you have an emotional and social need, and then you have your spiritual need. So your physical need is obviously your exercise and eating healthy and continuously improving. Within that, your mental is your self-awareness, your meditation practice, your reading, great books, all of that stuff continuously improving their emotional and social. This is basically your relationships, how you are continuously improving your relationship, you're having deeper conversations, you're understanding the people in your deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's continually getting better in the emotional and social aspects. And the last one is the spiritual aspect. And I talked about this a little bit before, where I don't believe that spiritual is necessarily the religious aspect of it, but really it's coming down to Viktor Frankl, Ikigai, your meaning and your Ikigai, where you're coming from and what is absolutely important to you. If you wanted to think about it in the way of the Stoic meditation on death, very, very great way to go about it. Millions of different ways that you could possibly come to, what's important to you spiritually. But that's definitely not something that you want to overlook, and you want to continuously be improving your connection to that. You want to be continuously improving your ability to think about that and think deeply about not only just yourself but also your connection to that meaning and to that Ikigai. So that was the 7 habits of highly effective people. I want to thank you guys for watching this video, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again next time. Cheers.
Thanks for watching. Please follow the link in the description to get access to the product.